I welcome you, my friends, to this series of teachings I've entitled The Falseness of Generational Curse Teaching, or the error of generational curse teaching. Consider it GC teaching. It's my desire to break off most, if not all, of this type of teaching that from your spirit and mind, if you've heard it, or you feel you're in bondage to it, or you feel that you have some almost like a cloud over your head. We're gonna set you free from that as you go through the sessions. Let me start by saying that God has called us to be free and to stay free and not to be entangled again in any yoke of bondage. We read this in Galatians chapter 5 verse 1. Now, I don't want to say that there is nothing generational or a generational aspect which can come into our life. But what I am saying, it is not what many are going forth teaching, where there's teaching that you've got to bring out a chart and you've got to start asking what your former relatives have done, your grandmother or your great grandmother or your great great grandmother, and somehow think that, oh, you have to be released from some curse which is dogging your tracks. I mean, you're not free. I mean, Jesus has provided redemption for you, but you gotta work through this process of getting free from a curse. We're going to show you that is not true. We're going to show you that whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Okay, now, again, a generational GC teaching, what does it mean? It's the idea that failures or the sins of your parents before you, or grandparents, great-grandparents, I don't know how far they want to go down the line, but it's passed down physical afflictions because of their sin, and have somehow went down your line, and that you need to be free of something which you are not. Now I got to say this quickly. Is there even the slightest truth in any form that some of this is a reality? How seriously should you take this? First of all, I want to say this up front. We're going to be talking about various things, but lest you turn me right off and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just not informed. Well, I suggest I do have an understanding about some of these things. Now, there is genetic deficiencies that can be a part of a family line that go down a line. I mean, the medical field does recognize this, okay? I mean, how many times have you been to the doctor and where they've asked you, did your mother or father or grandparents have this affliction? They want to do a family history to see, because why? There's genetic deficiencies that do go down certain family DNA lines. All right. Now that's common knowledge. I'm not suggesting there's not any truth to that. But does that mean that one has to feel that first of all, their parents did something wrong, or their grandparents, because they got affliction A or affliction B or C? Does that mean they have to feel so inclined that this is what's happened to them because of their sin? and that is passed on to you because of your wrongdoing. Well, we know from Genesis chapter 1, I mean, everything, when Adam and Eve sinned, what happened really was the world degenerated. It had life, it had peace, it had harmony, even physically, mentally, spiritually. When sin came, death came, and it said the whole creation groans until now. But of course, that doesn't mean that you could bring out a chart and bring out, well, I gotta, I have to feel bad about Adam's sin. I gotta confess Adam and Eve's sin. No, you see what you got there. You got the results of the fall that are coming down through the generations. And that's just it. Like sometimes some of this GC teaching, they talk about your great-grandmother or your great-great-grandmother. Well, why stop there? I mean, therefore you should go right back to the Garden of Eden, We'll get into that, but sure, there are genetic deficiencies that exist down certain family lines. It could be when the gene pool, when parent A married parent B. There's just things in the genetic DNA line which would make one more prone to one type of deficiency or lacking of resistance for this, that, or the other than another family. Now that's true. We do acknowledge that. We can agree mental states or ways of thinking, all right, can go down a family line. Now, we've heard it said, and I don't mean to cause any offense here, and I most certainly do not believe this is true in on every case, but we've always heard that if parents are on welfare, if they're on welfare, that their offspring might become so accustomed to to an extremely passive life of not having to work, and they themselves, they can tend or be prone to go down the same way. Now, of course, this doesn't happen to everyone as a given. If one's parents are called in what's called being on the dole, the kids might have a hard time breaking the cycle of that, as that's what most people in culture are concerned. It's a possibility with many of them. How do they break that cycle from what the parents were doing, or not that it was their fault, but once you're on the free money, okay, once you're on that, for some families it becomes a stronghold of the mind for them to overcome that. But that is not a curse on the offspring where there's some satanic power keeping them down. All right? What really needs to happen in such cases, there just needs to be a renewing of the mind that needs to take place. And that happens with many that come from such families. I'm not suggesting, every single individual doesn't rise up and make a way for themselves in life. No. But it's common knowledge that there is a concern that there's a cycle, that a stronghold of the mind that can take place. But I think it's a mistake and we're amiss to be declaring, okay, you have this curse you've got to break. No, you just basically got to just rise up and change your way of thinking, okay? For those who need to. Maybe some offspring do that automatically, and I'm not saying they don't, but let's get into this, and we'll take our time. Don't be in a rush. Don't second guess me, okay? Like think, well, you don't know this happened and that. We'll deal with all of these things, okay? But let's go over and bring up a verse which is used in a generational sense, okay? And it's in Exodus chapter 20 verses 4 to 6. Exodus 24 to 6, where we read this. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water or under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those that hate me. But showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. Exodus 24 to 6. Now remember the positive part there, all right? But showing steadfast love to those, he goes on to say, who love me and keep my commandments. Now, what does that say and what does it not say? Or from a historical standpoint, that was from the book of Exodus. From a historical standpoint then, what does it mean? How did God ever carry this out that we see in the scripture? I mean, God was warning a generation that if they engaged in those type of sins, leaving God, yes, their generational line would feel the effects. But we ask how? Was it some spiritual demon which went into their life and began to put a cloud over their life? No. Like, history shows what would happen. They would lose their nation. And this happened numbers of times. They were brought into captivity. You know, they'd be taken into slavery, and their captivity would go on for sometimes hundreds of years. Now think of Babylon. Think of Israel losing their nation in the time of Jeremiah, and the descendants for many generations were in a strange land. Now, if you think of Daniel and all his contemporaries, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, all those heroes of the Bible that we know about, I mean, they themselves, they were a part of those latter generations who were in captivity. They were in Babylon. So, I mean, what can we know, with this? It's not that the descendants, get this, it's not that the descendants were under a curse and they had a cloud over them and the devil was dodging their tracks. No, it just basically meant because of their great-great-grandparents who rebelled against the Lord in Israel, they lost their nation. And their offspring, their descendants, were in captivity. Yes, to the third, fourth generation. But it was not some type of spiritual bondage, if you will. Now, we'll pick this up on part 2. Okay, thank you for your time.